Welcome to Season 1, Episode 15 of Digital Section, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today, we're fighting off bandits and killing massive creatures for their sweet, sweet loot. We're hitching across a galaxy and finding ourselves in the inhospitable planet of Pandora. We're randomizing our loot and heading to the Borderlands, the Gearbox property that puts us in an unforgiving world and hoped we could figure it out.
Before we start our vault hunting journey and get attacked by seemingly everything, we're Joe and Mark, two dudes who love talking pop culture with you, and finally decided to start recording it for the enjoyment of other people. After you listen to the show, please like, comment, subscribe, and review. Reviews are very important to this show as we continue to find our audience, but we are extremely thankful for your support. But we need more of it, and we need your help to keep spreading the word, like our friend Roy, who we've now mentioned at least 3 times. This show can be found, though, where you listen to your favorite podcasts. We're on most platforms, most of the famous ones, that is. But if you got here by accident, try searching for Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, on your favorite platforms. If you're not following podcast websites, you can also find us on YouTube. We're also on Facebook and Twitter by searching for @DigitalDissect1. Our social media sites share more pop culture news and current information, so feel free to join the conversation. We will also continue to name drop our most vocal fans, so definitely let us know what you're thinking. Joe, I actually really wanted to hate Borderlands. I mean, hard when it first came out.
Interesting. Just because of all the time we've known each other and how much I know how much you really love this franchise, I didn't know that you wanted to hate it so bad.
Yeah, I mean, just like Jerry Seinfeld returning something for spite. That's kind of how things started with me, because Gearbox wasn't incredibly well known when they released Borderlands. But so as part of that issue, they overcompensated by marketing the shit out of Borderlands when it first came out.
I do remember that. Oh my gosh. I remember the song that was used, which was, I think it was the same song that was used for, I think, Arkham City. They used the same Ain't No Place for No Hero. Is that what it was?
Short-Change Hero was 2.
Short-Change Hero, yeah, that was the second one. Yeah, the first one was not Short-Change Hero.
It was Cage the Elephant.
That's the one. Yep.
Ain't No Rest for the Wicked.
That's it. Yep.
Which, I mean, I absolutely love that CD. I still own it. But that's what caused that spite, though, man. Like, it was a property that I didn't know a ton about, and because of the advertising, I saw it everywhere. I hated Claptrap for some reason.
Which really is too bad, because he's a great character. Claptrap is easily one of my favorite parts of the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I hated him because I saw him so many times. I'm like, this is a stupid little robot. I don't care about him. Yeah, dude.
Who's this square ass R2D2? What's going on here?
Yeah, he's got one wheel. I mean, you could just knock him over.
Yeah, just hit him from the side. You'll fall right out. You'll fall right down. You can't do anything.
Oh yeah, there's no way he's preventing the cutoff throw at the plate. He's too tiny for that. But yeah, I hated Borderlands at first just because of that, and so I wouldn't actually play the game until about 3 years after it came out. Oddly enough.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was on sale for like $5, and
well, might as well try at that point.
Yeah, that's when I tried it. When did you pick it up?
When you told me to be honest. I seriously didn't play the game until we went on our we tried doing our platinum trophy spree for PlayStation Network.
Yes.
So
yes.
we tried going. I think your goal was to get to level 40, and my goal was just to be along. I didn't have I knew it wasn't going to hit 40, but I wanted to get as many as I could and enjoy the ride with you for as long as you wanted to do it. And I just remember the feeling that I had playing was like a little kid who was forced to go and do something. Not forced, he wants to go hang out with his big brother.
Strongly encouraged.
Yes. And his big brother has is far more experienced and far better at this than him, and you just go along with it. And you were just slaughtering things left and right, and I was just gaining XP with doing like very, very little.
I mean, that's an easy way to get ahead in Borderlands. If you haven't played it, just find somebody who's beefier and has a lot more weapons, and you just ride that XP wave.
Oh yeah, it's pretty great, and I mean, XP is abound. You get better loot and better drops
Yeah.
when that's happening. So I was just getting all the weapons, all the money, and all the XP with very, very little effort on my part.
I almost forgot about our great platinum journey. I was at, it was like 2015, I think, or 2014. We just,
That sounds about right.
yeah,
Mhm.
we went absolutely hog wild for that. But
We really did. That's the platinum. I think the Platinum Brotherhood is what we called it,
yes,
because
we did.
it did like the lengths we went to platinum Assassin's Creed Brotherhood by like
Oh,
buying extra copies of the games for our friends, and like I think borrowing like a few other PlayStation 2s, PlayStation 3s just to have
yeah,
around for the
yeah.
sake of doing it.
This was something that we'll definitely cover
Mm-hmm.
in a future episode, because Joe and I have long talked about this series we're going to do called The Games That Made Us, and this is definitely a story that we don't want to keep from you,
No. Mm-mm.
but we
We'll
will
get more into
tell.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but today we're here to talk to you about Gearbox and Borderlands. So the focus that I wanted to start with here was looking at the CEO of Gearbox. His name is Randy Pitchford, and this guy's actually been, involved in making video games for a very long time.
Oh yeah, I recognize the name from the old Duke Nukem days.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. The very crass and hilarious to me when I was a kid, Duke Nukem.
Oh yeah, sorry, Cross. Like it was definitely the first video game I ever played that had strippers in it.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And then ones when they eventually had like pig heads and 4 sets of breasts. It was really weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Got the people going, Joe, as we like to say,
Did. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I got the blood pumping for the for the 9-year-old me. Uh, the studio he worked for was called 3D Realms back in the day. You
Mhm.
probably remember them from the title card on these first
Oh
person
yeah.
shooters. I played Duke Nukem for a little bit, but even my parents realized just how not palatable that was for a
Ooh.
child of my age. So they kept us from playing Duke Nukem. What they couldn't do though was prevent me from playing Shadow Warrior,
Ooh.
which was a very similar crass type
Mhm.
of first person shooter where you play this ninja named Lo Wang, I believe. His
Great.
tagline was "Who wants some Wang?" Uh,
Yeah, hard to believe a white guy designed that.
yeah, it was you know what, for the time, once again, this is the age the age I was, that I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was really fun.
Hmm.
But what I didn't realize, until I started digging into Borderlands after I played it, was that Randy Pitchford was connected to, all three properties. And so I guess for me, it made me realize that I've been programmed for this level of, hyper realized violence alongside, some average storytelling in those early games. But
Hmm.
yeah, Randy Pitchford was helping, to distort my reality and what was acceptable behavior for, well over 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, good job, Randy. Well done.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy. You're probably the reason for why my kids will need counseling one day. But yeah, dude, after 3D Realms though, just like how the folks at Telltale Games, in the aftermath of a lot of these action adventure studios shutting down, some of the folks from 3D Realms would actually leave, and then Randy specifically would bounce around from project to project until Gearbox would be founded in 1999. So yeah, like the Duke Nukem series and some of these FPS games that he was designing, I mean, they were really popular right around like
Hmm.
94, 95,
Oh
right? Like
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, the golden age of these really
Yes.
quote unquote violent FPS games. But um,
Yeah, just was it 64 bits of mayhem at that time?
I don't yeah, I mean, in the mid 90s it was
Hmm.
64 bits, yeah. Depending on how early, it would have been 32 and then
Yeah.
16 and 8, but the real FPS stuff was all the rage back
Oh
then. Is
yeah.
what we're all talking about. Oh man. But But yeah, so Gearbox forms at the very, very end of the 1900s, and takes us into the millennium with kind of an interesting idea. I'm not sure if you've seen the term Halo meets Diablo before.
I have not heard of it, but I mean that cross does sound pretty Borderlands. Yep.
Yeah, this would be Randy Pitchford's idea that he would be,
hmm
molding and shaping for a while, but not really sure how to get it into a studio and get it in front of someone to pay them to
hmm
make it. So yeah, what
hmm
is it? Is it an RPG? Is it a
The
first
first
person
person
shooter?
shooter? We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, what the hell is this idea,
hmm
Randy? And to be honest with you, when I was younger, I remember FPS games were just they're just more fun, I think, to me back
hmm
then. Because I didn't need a story.
No.
I didn't care who the character was and what they were
Mm-mm.
doing. Like none of that stuff mattered to
No,
me.
give me my friends, the Golden Gun, and a Friday night and a bunch of freaking like, I don't know, Tab or Mountain Dew, whatever you're drinking, whatever your poison is. It's gonna be a great night.
Surge? Were you popping some Surge
Oh,
back then?
Surge. Yes. Surge or
Oh,
Jolt. Do you remember Jolt?
oh, I remember Jolt. Yes. I remember my hands shaking at like 3 a.m.
It's the overabundance of caffeine. It's like a bizarre caffeine war of the 1990s.
Yeah,
There's
we
like
loved our caffeine back
we
then, man. I don't
did.
know
It
why.
was like the pre-energy drink era. And
It's
all of
true.
its weirdness.
It's very true. We just had copious amounts of caffeine jammed
Mhm.
into, these sodas. And yeah, dude, I remember that. That's what kept us going late into the night.
Oh yeah.
but yeah, that whole FPS thing, for some reason they were easier for me to consume back then than they are now.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't actually turn a tide for me until right around the late 90s, where I would be playing more RPGs than I'd ever played before. And I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking, both retro and modern, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger.
Oh yeah.
I was, yeah,
Mhm.
playing the shit out of those back
Oh
then.
yeah. Did you ever get into the Lunar series when you were younger?
No, no, not so much. I
Ah.
don't know.
Mhm.
That might be more your exclusive province on this episode.
Yeah, it was a fun one. Anime cutscenes, like animated ones that were like stitched in when you hit certain parts, was all about that when I was in middle school. It was super cool. I'm like, ooh, look at these high quality cartoons with women barely wearing any clothing.
Once again, it's what got us going back then,
Yeah,
man.
bizarre. It just hooked middle aged, middle school, like middle aged men, probably too, to be honest.
Yeah,
But middle
middle-aged
aged
men in
men
the
and
middle
middle school
school.
children alike.
Hello, fellow youth. Yeah, yeah. This whole idea of Halo meets, I call it Diablo. Some might call it Diablo, but I'm just going to call it Diablo. That's what I think we're going to go with.
I mean, that's what you should go with. If you're saying Diablo, then just get the fuck out of here.
Get out of here!
Like, what is wrong with you?
Look at this guy's cabbage over here. Say Diablo. Yeah. Uh, when I first saw the behind the scenes of this, and you keep seeing this Halo meets Diablo idea,
Mhm.
the more that I loved RPGs, the more that I realized how underserved of an idea this was, because there's not really any, there, at least before this point, there weren't really any comparable games out there, right? This is before
Mhm.
Destiny. This is before that kind of stuff. So this idea of a game that could randomize loot and be a first person shooter with an RPG element, I mean, this is the type of thing that I can't believe was almost started like by the shoestrings, right? Like they got this
Yeah.
done by the shoestrings, um, because nobody wanted to give it a shot. They laughed
Mhm.
Randy Pitchford out of almost every boardroom when he tried to give this idea to people.
Which is weird because really, like putting those two genres together, like should have been like almost like someone should be like, why have we never tried this before? Like their RPG has been a staple in the gaming community for I don't know quite a while at this point, and first person shooters are really beginning to emerge as something that's going to more or less take over the gaming industry. So like I don't know, like trying to combine them in a way should have just made sense.
Well, I think part of the issue that came up for the team here at Gearbox was that Borderlands was being pitched as a retro sci-fi look.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a wasteland, so they wanted it to be somewhat mechanical, somewhat rusty.
Yeah.
And and then they had this whole idea of this, this mashing of those two ideas together. So when you go into a room to pitch this type of idea to people, I mean, I think that's where the confusion comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want this slick looking game, but you want kind of a dirty, rusty area that it occurs within. Then you throw in this RPG element to an FPS. I mean, how do you get behind that? I mean, who like if you're
Yeah.
just a boardroom member and you're like going, hey, just give me something that sells for $60 a pop here,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't appear to be that thing.
Yeah. Maybe that was like maybe he was trying to do too many things at once. And
Yeah.
that's where it just was just overwhelming. It's like, hold on. No. You can't fly that close to the sun here, Randy. What the hell are you
No,
thinking?
no, Randy, you may have gotten away with that kind of bullshit when you were asking people if they wanted some wing, but nowadays we need a little bit more.
Yeah.
And but keep in mind though, man, like we've talked about how most video games are made by serious studios. They're looking at maybe a 5 to 7 year development cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were developing this game, once they finally were given some money to play around with it, this identity crisis would come at a really bad time because there were games like Rage that came out at this time, which was also like an FPS set in a wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Fallout 3, like Resurrection, if you want to call it, of that series. And that has the same type of mentality where you've got a retro look, but it's also sci-fi and it's also in a wasteland too.
Yeah, it does do all those same things.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. So the folks that were making Borderlands, like they knew they had a pretty unique idea that should reasonably sell, right?
I mean,
But
it should, but it also kind of sounds like they've got an uphill battle against them at this point.
oh, they absolutely did. I mean, they basically had a date in mind that they wanted to launch this with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem that occurred was that Brian Martell, who was the chief creative officer at this point in time for the company, he basically started this like secret operation, this secret hidden project within the company. And it was to take a look at the game and potentially redesign every aspect of the artwork that was within
Oh, okay.
it. So they did this fairly late in the development process because they realized
Mm-hmm.
we look too much like a bunch of games that are going to come out at the exact same time. So what does he do? Oh, he just scraps like 3 years of artwork that somebody did.
It's nothing, no big deal.
just
Mm-hmm.
just took all of it and threw it out. And you know what? I tried to do some research on who the marketing director was at that time or who the art director was. Yeah, I can't find the name anywhere because she was so
Oh,
upset that she like left the industry.
wow.
Yeah, this
Wow,
poor
just
woman
completely
was,
says she's done. Wow,
yeah, she
okay.
was so upset by this process that she just said, "Yep, I am leaving and I am not coming back." And honestly, I can feel for her
Yeah,
because that's horrible. It's horrible for
yeah.
that kind of thing to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean, 3 years of your life and work, and then suddenly it's like, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and take another direction. Oh,
yeah, yeah. We
oh.
appreciate your hard work and
Mm-hmm.
all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into this. And we're just about to release this with your name on it, but
But
we're
hear
gonna do
me out.
this. Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. So that's how we actually ended up getting the cell shading effect that
Oh yeah.
Borderlands became known for.
I know that was my first experience with cell shading was definitely Legend of Zelda Wind Waker.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember like that game getting a lot of initial flack because like this looks so like childish. Like with how cell shading looks, it looks so crazy cartoony. And we had just gotten done with like two incredible games with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and how fucking wrong everyone was about like Wind Waker because it was a beautiful game,
Yeah.
which pretty much is the same thing with Borderlands because I mean, it sounds like right now we're building up to so like this is like probably a really bad idea, but turns out to be pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, not only was it, just a beautiful way to reimagine this wasteland, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely set it apart from the whole rest of the field.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
because
talking like it looks significantly different than like the the absolute seriousness of the Fallout game. Well, I was maybe absolute serious of the Fallout games. They have plenty of humor in them too, but a completely different tone still compared to Fallout.
Yeah, the tone critically changes before you even know anything about the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've talked about the 3D Realms connection to Randy Pitchford. That type of humor would make its way to Borderlands. And so when I start to think about a game that manages to have like a hyper violent setting and you're trying to give that an identity of its own, uh, the cell shading definitely did. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
gave it instant personality
Mm-hmm.
to this whole universe. And yeah, I mean, millions of titles sold later.
Yeah, it just
Yeah,
works. Like again, it shows that the game like doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, like you get a good story, you get really good smooth solid game mechanics.
yeah,
Comparing it to Fallout, like I didn't have nearly like the glitching and gameplay issues that the Fallout games, for as great and fun as they are, like you don't get those in Borderlands. Like it
yeah,
was just it operated so smooth. And then again, like that cell shading mixed with like the weird just grit and grimy like world that is Pandora. And your first literally like the first like 5 minutes of the game, just you being introduced to the characters, like it works beautifully. Like you get hooked instantly by just the style and the script and the gameplay and like the visual that you see so quick in this game.
yeah. I think from a distinguishing standpoint, with Fallout, if you don't even look at story or mechanics, if you just look at textures and
Mm-hmm.
how the landscape appears, versus the things that are interacting with it. Fallout, I played that game for
Oh yeah.
400, 500 hours. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it consumed a lot of my life for several years. So don't get me wrong when I say this, but in Fallout, you tend to get a lot of texture oversaturation where
Mm-hmm.
they just look like unidentifiable blobs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to see any distinction after a while.
Yeah.
And with Borderlands and the cell shading structure and using that to portray details, it just gives a personality to the landscape that fits really well with that dark humor, somehow
Mm-hmm.
spliced in with violence, and then, like you said, a story that doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And yeah, and that's I mean, talking about that story and some of the characters, like you basically got this like Mad Max science sci-fi theme you've got going on here. And Claptrap is probably like you said, like touching back on him, like you kind of thought he was thoroughly annoying, easily one of like the most like favorite characters of this game. I remember like one of the first things that I heard him say that maybe like again like really speaks so well of the character and just the I don't know, I guess like the atmosphere of this game series is he's talking to you, getting you like already like in the basically tutorial portion of the game. And if you've heard Claptrap talk, he's got this really like high pitched jovial voice, and he says something along the lines of like, don't let the sound of my voice deceive you, it's just in my programming, I really am quite depressed. um
yeah, yeah. He
yep, like
is
that's fantastic.
he is I love him as like a tutorial character because
Hmm.
uh like there have been times where I'd start a game up or something and I would leave it idle for a little bit, and whether I'm like making food or something, you sit there and all of a sudden you'll just hear Claptrap yell, "Follow the soothing sounds of my voice." And yeah, he's a perfect
Hmm.
like a SpongeBob SquarePants kind of character set against this vicious and like wild wasteland that you're in. And so yeah, I love how the games typically start off with him, trying to guide you along.
Hmm.
It's a great choice that they made with that.
Oh yes.
Um, but yeah, that Mad Max environment that you talked about, man, it was really interesting for them to pick that despite what they were up against, right? We talked about Rage, which is a similar type of environment, and obviously Fallout. Um, but they managed to balance that Mad Max style pretty well. And I think what that really stems from is trusting in their development crew.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had a crew that had a task of, basically completely redoing the game after 3-4 years of development. And so in trusting them that they could get the job done, it started off like a lot of standard business practices do, where you don't have buy-in from everybody at first. And once they started to actually like make this critical shift in tone and like the artwork and everything, um, it went from what was like a 60-40 belief across the company to people just being completely bought in. And
Ooh.
so once they started doing this and they're seeing the results of it, we got some really, really cool ideas out of this. I don't know if you remember in the first game, but you had an ability as Roland to be able to shoot your party members to heal them.
Yep.
Do you remember
Oh
that?
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was great because like if you like you got shields in this game that you can apply, right? Well, if your
Hmm.
shields are down and then you're getting hit, like yeah, the end is kind of inevitable after a bit. Um, but that ability to shoot to heal is one of those things that just kind of came out of this like creative shift and like all these things that they were doing, late term. And so this motivated team legitimately did not want to stop working on this game. I mean, they loved it so much, they put so much effort into it, they just kept going. And so I got to say, for a game that I didn't even want to try playing, I really do wish I would have paid, full price for it. It's just to, yeah, just to tell these
Well,
folks, thanks, man. You guys made a
yeah.
kick-ass game.
Well, I mean, with the amount of money I think we've put into it over the years, I think they'll forgive you that you didn't buy the first game right away.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
It's
guys are
probably,
listening,
I'll
if
forgive it.
if y'all are listening at Gearbox, just know that Joe and I spent a lot of money on your game, and yeah, this is an open invitation to join us if you
Yeah.
ever want to do that. Um,
Anytime.
but dude, you know what? With this game, what really made me love it even more than I did after I started playing it was just the mentality of the people who were in charge.
Hmm.
And when they were making this game, you can actually see this a couple times. Randy kind of says it himself. Some of the developers have even been interviewed about this. And what the mentality of the Gearbox like company at this time was that it's not about risks, it's about being okay if you fail, because gaming is a very risky industry, right?
Hmm.
People are going to be making choices that may not work. They they may completely fall flat on their face.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've seen games kind of live and die by that sword.
Absolutely. And it's even worse if you make the mistake of really hyping your game and then it gets pushed back and you keep hyping it more and it gets pushed back again and you hype it again and then it finally comes out and it sucks.
Unless you're Naughty Dog.
Unless you're Naughty Dog, that works out. Naughty Dog and really the Legend of Zelda. Like there's not been a I don't has there been a single like Legend of Zelda game that they didn't push back and then it came out and they're like, you know what, it was fine. It's okay.
In
Uh
recent memory, no. Yeah. In recent memory, like
mhm.
every modern Zelda game has been pushed back,
Yep.
and almost every Naughty Dog release has been pushed back, for
Mhm.
the exception of like one or two.
Yeah.
But they always come out and they did exactly what you hoped they would do, was just
Hmm.
make a cohesive and awesome game. And so that's something that I wish more studios would do. But yeah, I mean, what blows my mind about this, Joe, was that you basically had a game that was already created. Like it was fully fleshed out.
Hmm.
Maybe they were doing some finishing things to it, and they probably could have coasted to the finish line, but they didn't. They completely pivoted, and all of a sudden you've got this game with some of these like crazy RPG and FPS elements built into it, but then you've got the abilities that they created off the cuff, and then you've got the crazy combinations of weapons in this weapon generator that
Oh
they
yeah. Hmm.
that they did with this, man. I mean, when I was looking at the box cover for this and it was like, oh, 17 million combinations of weapons or whatever. And I was like, why do I care about that?
Yeah, that's too much. Who can handle that? No one's got time for 17 million weapon combinations.
I thought nobody did until I'd been playing this game for, let's say, like 30 hours. And I looked at my inventory and I had two assault rifles in there that
Mhm.
if you just looked at the title, it's like, yeah, It's the same thing. Just sell one, whatever one you don't want to use, and then get rid of the other. Well, then I actually started looking at the stock of the rifle, the grips of the rifle, the butt of
Hmm.
the rifle, the scope of the rifle, and I was looking at all these things, and I went, "Holy crap!" Like each one of these weapons has like five pieces that are completely different on each one, even though the same title.
Wow.
so and that was me just like not being a super fan or anything. I'm just checking these
Hmm.
things out, and I went, "Holy
Holy
shit! Like
shit.
this is crazy."
Wow. Okay. It's dedication.
Yeah. Oh, it's a total graduation from some of the FPS games of the past where you pick up a weapon and that weapon is it's finite. It's
Hmm.
there's nothing unique about it.
No.
And I'm not dogging Gears of War for this, but like in Gears of War, if you picked up a weapon and I mean you see it on the ground, like yeah, you pick it up and it looks like every weapon you can pick up like that style the whole rest of the game.
Yeah.
Um, so that's not a problem, but like
No.
in Borderlands, you all of a sudden like you're picking up weapons, and then like maybe you have someone drop into your game, you're playing co-op for a little bit, and like you're showing off your guns, and you're like, oh yeah, dude, I can totally see the difference between yours and mine.
Hmm.
So yeah, dude, it's just once again, it all comes back to what we just mentioned about being okay if you fail, right?
Hmm.
Like taking these types of chances on a game that already required people to take a chance to develop it. I mean, that spirit really brought us an absolutely like legendary game. It just did. Yeah, Joe, the I would say the strength of Borderlands really starts with the supporting cast that you can pick as a playable character, and usually there's at least four of them,
Hmm.
as we were greeted with in the first Borderlands game.
Yeah, you get
Um,
for what classes you've got you got a gunzerker, and then there's is it a soldier? Is that the class?
well, so the Gunzerker would be
Hmm.
in Borderlands 2.
Yep.
In Borderlands 1, yeah. So you had Roland the Soldier,
Hmm.
you had the Siren class,
There's a siren. Yep. Hmm.
yeah, and then we would end up getting like the Hunter class, and then the Berserker, I think is who you're looking for. I think he's called a Berserker.
Yeah, it's berserker class. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
hunter
yeah,
class.
Brick.
That's your sword, the sword boy of the series. They're always the
Yeah,
close range ones.
yeah. You got Mordecai and Bloodwing, and then you got Brick just running in there, punching the shit out of things. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a really interesting balance, right? Like, I think they did a really good job with that in the beginning. I always pick the soldier class because I love automated weapons, and if you told me just to throw a turret out there and it'll shoot things for you, you basically always have backup no matter where you
Hmm.
are. So, so yeah, yeah. For me, I was a big Roland fan. Boy, I loved Roland back then. But I would say the only issue with Borderlands One when it came to the characters,
Hmm.
like we've talked about the landscape and the hyper violence and the dark humor, but the main characters, if you weren't someone who bought the comics or tried to read into any of the logs and all that stuff, like if you were just playing through the standard game and interacting with the plot, yeah, these characters didn't really do a whole lot for you that whole
No,
first game.
no, they didn't. They're basically just what a class selection you get to pick depending on if you like a well-rounded character, a tank character, an upfront character, or more or less, I guess, space magician. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just you basically it's just your class, and that is it. And then trying to remember, is Into the Borderlands, is that based off of one or two, the Telltale game?
Oh, the Tales from the Borderlands game
Hmm.
is a continuation. So
Okay.
yeah, that's just a continuation of the events of Borderlands 2.
Yep, and I thought it was too because yeah, I definitely remember Zero and Zero being in there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Which yeah, we'll definitely get to that Borderlands 2 cast because yeah, a little bit more happens there,
Hmm.
but ultimately like Borderlands 1, and this is we're very careful with this, right? Like we're very careful not to tear apart someone's creative vision for a game, right? Or a creative vision for a comic or a movie or a TV series, right? Like we will definitely bring up some gripes here, but we're very specific not to just say like, yeah, this was bad. This was
Yeah.
bad and they should feel bad. We
Yeah.
never say that kind of
We're
stuff.
not going to be the people who make you work on something for 3 years and just say we're going a different direction.
Yeah.
Not the kind of guys we are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's just indicative of what was going on in the first half of this show that we covered. Um, this is a game that had to get completely stripped down and reworked, and so maybe the characters needed a supplement because they knew of everything else that you had to dig into and work through. And yeah, the character development. I mean, in most FPS games, don't have a whole lot of time anyway.
No.
So
Most of them are like
yeah,
you. I don't know. You hear their name once in a while. It's kind of a typical backstory of the same thing. And I just like maybe it's because like modern like FPS like the story is like I don't know there because like they know 5 people will play it, but mostly they're gonna be doing online like deathmatch and like multiplayer stuff.
yeah.
So like there's just not a lot of attention to those individual stories.
Well, to tell you what, Joe, that's why we're here because
Yeah.
our unofficial mission has kind of become like this for folks who've been listening to us since day one. What we end up doing is going back and looking at a series that maybe someone missed, or maybe you've heard about it, but you don't have the time to seriously dig into it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
really, 17 million gun combinations? You passed on that because of the math alone. And accounting
yes,
for inflation, that's roughly 18 million gun combinations.
yeah. You know what? There's probably some math we could have done there. I'm shocked neither one of us did it, but
No, I mean,
hey, whatever.
it's math. Who likes it?
Yeah. Well, here's what we're going to do. We'll do a really quick crash course on Borderlands 1. And the reason why, just from a story standpoint here, is because a lot of the story for Borderlands is hidden in the DLC. So if you never played the DLC and you just played the main game, there's some of this context you're going to miss out on. So we're not going to give away everything there. But what I would like to do is kind of set the stage for why Borderlands is even a story to begin with. And a lot of this has to do with some pretty common tropes in science fiction. Like in the Firefly universe or the Firefly verse, as we call it,
Oh, yes.
um, they always refer to the Earth that was, right?
Hmm.
And that Earth was used up and we had to move on. That same kind of idea is here. There's always a scarcity in resources, and that's where power inevitably comes from in a lot of science fiction. Who can control it, and then who goes to find it? So ultimately, in the Borderlands universe, the setup for the first game comes from this power struggle to colonize a planet called Pandora that we've talked about. So main setting for the game.
And now
And yeah,
enlighten me because, or maybe you're getting there, but from what we've basically said so far, Pandora, not very hospitable. So why on earth would we want to really settle there?
well, it's not so much settling, it's more harvesting. Okay.
Ooh.
What can we harvest from Pandora? And so in the game, you see this company called Atlas. Okay. Like when you go to the weapons machines and you see some of the gun manufacturers,
Hmm.
you'll see Atlas pop up quite a bit. And the reason for that is because this company put a bunch of money into Pandora and trying to harvest these. You've probably seen iridium. You see iridium a lot in the second game as a resource, right?
Yes.
Um, so they basically realized that there's some very useful metals and things like that we can harvest from this planet. So um, I look at Pandora as a worldwide Australia, and I'll explain this a little
That
bit better.
very, very accurate from the memes I've read about the country slash continent.
Well, who are you going to employ to be able to basically risk their lives to run machinery for a company that's here to pillage the planet of its natural resources, right?
Hmm.
Well,
So
just like anybody with in these sci-fi universes, they basically took prisoners and inmates and people that they thought they could use, and then basically tell them, hey, you'll have freedom eventually, but you're going to have to do this before you get it. So that's what they basically employed to do these mining operations and dig into Pandora.
the
Yeah.
worst kind of indentured servitude sounds great.
Well, it gets worse, Joe.
Oh.
Why it gets worse is because they realized as they were harvesting iridium and some of the natural resources on this planet that it did certain things to these prisoners, to these indentured
Ooh.
servants. And so
Oh.
these end up becoming the psychos that you see in the game. These,
Oh. Oh, that's
yeah.
them. Okay, yeah. So they are like one electric guitar and chrome spray paint away from being the craziest bard you've ever seen in a movie.
Oh, dude, absolutely. But the only difference is that the guys that are at the bar have one arm that's about 6 feet long, and then another arm that's only about maybe two, and they're running at you with a giant sword in their hand.
Yeah, they do
That's
that. They do that frequently.
Yeah, that's the difference. They found out when they were mining the iridium that it had a certain impact on the people that were touching them directly.
Hmm.
In the second game too, which we'll get to in a minute, slag becomes the term for the pollution essentially created. Think like sci-fi crude oil, if you will.
Gotcha.
Um,
And hey,
yeah,
kudos to Gearbox for going with Iridium and not some weird place filler like unobtainium. And
yes.
just sticking with it.
Oddly enough, the same name of the planet that they would pick in the Avatar franchise. Um,
Hilarious.
but I think that's what Borderlands 1 suffers from, Joe, is that this context is something that you don't necessarily get unless you poke around a little bit, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so there is some interesting story in here because part of the intrigue of this series is that you see what's called the Crimson Lance in the first game. And the Crimson Lance is actually like the militant arm of Atlas that's employed to, help maintain operations on the planet.
Yes, headed by
And
none other than Frau Farbissina herself.
yeah. Well, she is a mean bitch who heads up these operations. But ultimately, that's who comes in to police a lot of we'll call it the claim on Pandora, right?
Hmm.
So the Crimson Lance come in and they've got some of the best weaponry. They're highly trained, soldiers,
They've
and
got some pretty kick-ass looking armor. It's got a lot going
yeah.
on for them.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just like how I said, you could hump the hood of the Impala in Supernatural. I mean, you can hump that helmet, man. The
it's
Crimson Lance have some badass suits.
it's a good looking helmet.
and oddly enough, though, you do hear a little bit about this. So Roland the Soldier, he was a former Crimson Lance person who, which I won't give away all of that, but he ends up finding his way, onto the planet and doing other things. So either way, that's just some background building on stuff that you'll eventually find out in Borderlands 1 if you play through the DLC, you play through the whole game. But that whole resource war, which I think they actually referred to as like the corporate wars, because there would
Hmm.
be other corporations who would be vying for power and trying to, tap into this planet, right?
Yeah, but they
Um,
also sell you guns that you get to use throughout the game.
oh, of course,
Hmm.
absolutely, yeah, and which makes that whole idea of corporate wars even funnier because just like what you mentioned, every vendor has weaponry or technology sold by these companies
Hmm.
after they abandon operations or they're done doing what they wanted to do on the planet. Yeah, they just sell their shit.
Yeah, there you
It's hilarious. Um, but yeah. So ultimately, yeah, the Atlas Corporation, though, they find out about the vaults that are contained within Pandora, and so that becomes the motivating factor for them to continue their operations here. And it also becomes the entire reason for why we're playing the game
yeah,
because
because
there's
like
vault
all
hunters.
as I say, that's the name that all of your characters take on, or the title, not the name. They all get called Vault Hunters.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just called vault hunters. They're wanting to find that vault, open it up and see what's in there.
Yeah, cracking that chestnut open.
Yeah. Yeah. The only complication in that, Joe, is that there was a super advanced alien race on Pandora at one time called the Iridians. So
Hmm.
we talked about Iridium.
Yes.
Well, the Iridians are a play on that, right?
Hmm.
And the alien race here tried to contain the vaults as best they could, mostly because they realized the power of these vaults and why it was important to keep them shut. Which I will let folks either research on their own or play the game because these are some really awesome things to explore for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, But either way, you
So
don't see
just
a
the
whole lot of them.
one tiny caveat, then just one small inconvenience to the whole thing.
Yeah, we're not
Hmm.
here to tell you the entire plot of a game and to
No.
give your take on it today. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is just give you the setting and to let you know what you're going to be getting into should you
Yeah.
take that jump.
Hmm.
So either way, so just to set the stage for you there, I mean, to me, I thought there was enough intrigue and enough mystery. They did enough world building with this game, but they just didn't do it in time. That
Hmm.
was the problem. It's still a fun game. It's still a great experience, but if you did want to really, really dig deep into this and explore it for yourself, I'm just going to tell you ahead of time. There's plenty of things that you
Oh,
can
yes.
read or
Hmm.
watch, and so I think that's just a testament to the creative team here.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of tie-ins that you can use to figure more about the world of Pandora and it's yeah, not settlement, but definitely, I mean, pillaging. We can say pillaging at this point.
I think that's a fair word.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, let's strip the planet for everything it's got
Hmm.
and take everything not nailed down, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's how we do things. That's
Well,
that's the
yeah.
human way.
Well, and speaking of the human way, that's what actually gives us, I think, the majority of the intrigue in Borderlands 1 is what these humans did when either they got their freedom or these corporations shut down, realizing just how dangerous things were and got the hell out of there.
Hmm.
Because that's largely what you're seeing in the aftermath of the experience in Borderlands is that yeah, these bandits, they built their own cities after a while. Uh they some of the machinery that the corporations left behind, they created their own cities with those too. So there is some interesting like evolution of what happens with humanity after all that stuff shuts down, um, which does drive the majority of the plot for that first game. So yeah, it's a fun little romp.
Hmm.
I obviously you and I had enough fun, even though you were kind of a tag along on it. But I mean,
I mean, I regret nothing. I enjoyed my time.
yeah, yeah. Which you know what, this is once again a case of a studio that was listening,
Hmm.
because Borderlands 2 would be a huge launch. Borderlands 2 would end up taking some of the best aspects of one and actually kind of leave those untouched, and
Yeah.
then just really put in a ton of effort into the things that they decided to introduce.
Yes, and I would agree to that. I really like, again, like you said, like the best parts of it, the developer knew this is the parts that like these are the parts that like your gamers actually enjoyed. So instead of like trying to change that and make it more difficult, more complex, or basically just doing it for the sake of doing it, they just left it the same. So that a lot of the gameplay that worked so well, like that's still there for you. And you're not getting new game mechanics for the sake of getting a new game mechanic.
Yeah, it didn't feel like an Assassin's Creed Revelations, like a mini game where they brought in the tower defense
Hmm.
thing, if you remember that.
Oh, I recall the tower
uh
defense. Yeah. An annoying
yeah, I mean,
trophy it was, but we got it.
I mean, ultimately, that's something I don't want to flesh out too much, but I mean, but that's the point. Like the point is Borderlands 2 uh continued to be great in a lot of the ways that they were in the first game, whether that was
Hmm.
the all the different weapons you could get, or the really fun like trees that you could develop for your characters. They took those ideas and they kept those really solid. But I think the biggest thing that they paid attention to was actually giving you probably one of the most well fleshed out villains of all time. And Handsome Jack is easily one of my favorite bad guys I've ever had the joy of playing against.
Yeah, and you get does it don't you get a lot more of him in the DLC for this game?
Um, so not so much the DLC.
Hmm.
Um, you get a lot more of his story in what would be the pre-sequel, so the game that
Ah, yes.
follows Borderlands 2. Um, but in the DLC for Borderlands 2, though, it kind of it goes into some different territory. that does discuss some of the Hyperion Corporation, or the Hyperion. I think they're just called Hyperion. I don't think they're called Corporation.
No, I think it's just
But
Hyperion. Yeah.
yeah, but Hyperion, though, oddly enough, we can kind of go down that path, because Handsome Jack is like the CEO of Hyperion, and Hyperion is the, I don't know if we would call them the late arrival, but they're the people that show up after the Atlas Corporation, and they start trying to figure out, how can we once again strip down Pandora for all of its resources, pop open a vault while we're there.
Yeah, Bob's your uncle
yeah.
when we're done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just let's just strip this thing down. So but yeah, Handsome Jack, though, man, as a character, I mean, as a as somebody that you're having to fight against, I mean, from the very beginning of the game, once again, we're introduced to another set of vault hunters, similar types of abilities, a little bit different. They did tweak that just a little bit. But what I loved about Handsome Jack was, like, from the get-go, this guy is like, he's just picking at you the whole time. Like, they have their worldwide communication system, that you're all talking on.
Yep. Big brother.
And yeah, and right away, Handsome Jack is he's talking mad shit on you the entire time. Like, I mean, first off, you're on a train at the beginning of the game, and Handsome Jack derails it. And then as soon as he finds out that you're alive, yeah, he's just picking at you. Like, at one point, I think he's like eating pretzels while he's talking to you. So the guy doesn't even have enough respect to talk to you without eating.
Yep. And wasn't there something about a pony in him that comes up?
No, that wouldn't. Yes, it would be a pony, but that pony would have a very specific name that he would later call Butt Stallion. Made out of diamonds. Yeah. Good old Butt Stallion. Yeah. And Handsome Jack, I mean, what I think he does really well in this game, other than being voiced by Damian Clark, who, for those fans of the show that listen to our Supernatural episode, this guy would actually play the Rougarou in the episode of Supernatural that he appears. So Damian Clark would voice Handsome Jack and really provide that sarcastic, snarky, just let's call him an asshole, because that's what he was.
Yep. That don't have to beat around that bush.
Yeah, dude, he's just a complete asshole. But Damian Clark, oddly enough, dude, he didn't even plan to audition for Handsome Jack. I think he just happened to be in the same building doing an audition for a different property at that point in time.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, they just said, hey, while you're here, why don't you go ahead and give that a shot
and bang this out. Almost like what's his name from Far Cry 3, where they just liked his audition so much that they made him a game character that wasn't even supposed to be in it.
Yeah, Voss. Yeah.
Yeah,
I forget the actor's name, but yeah, it's the same type of idea where you've got someone who never had an intention to, be that big a part of something. And boom, all of a sudden, here we are. Ultimately, to not to get too far into Borderlands 2, because they did a really good job with what we've mentioned, the pre-sequel and Borderlands 2, because the pre-sequel, as you can probably figure out, takes place after Borderlands 1, but before Borderlands 2. Yeah, it's
so brilliant name, by the way, pre-sequel.
Yeah, it's a pretty brilliant name. But ultimately, it acts as a solid trilogy in a way, because we've mentioned how Handsome Jack is easily one of the best villains of all time, and I don't want to take away too much from that, because for those who haven't played the game, I don't want to rob you of that experience. He is such a good character that they figured at Gearbox 2, well, Handsome Jack is that great, let's make another game with him.
Yeah.
So the pre-sequel would end up doing that. And so ultimately, what I thought was great about this, Joe, is that it's not often that you get to see an experience for a character when they're still like a good character that eventually turns for the worse, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I thought was kind of a brilliant narrative from the Gearbox folks on the pre-sequel, is that it really did tell a story of how good intentions can easily go the wrong way. and that whole idea, there's no good deed goes unpunished. In this case, it's injected with some iridium, because the pre-sequel definitely explores this. For one, the struggle of these warring corporations on Pandora, because it takes place on the moon,
Mhm.
Elpis, the moon of Pandora. And so for some folks didn't actually care for the pre-sequel nearly as much as Borderlands 2, right? Because Borderlands 2 ended up having, this pretty massive release, and it was dominating, headlines when it came out, just because
Yeah.
of how solid the game it was. But for those of you who are fans of video game properties, the pre-sequel is a perfect game to help fully realize the motivations of Handsome Jack. It's basically like a character study, that whole game is. And so you get to fully understand, why Handsome Jack would become the person he was, not necessarily why he did the things he did, because they fully explore those things. You don't have to really worry about figuring that out.
Mhm.
It's just the idea of a game like this showing you how this type of character transformation is possible. And so that's why I absolutely earmarked the pre-sequel, because um, it didn't try to do a whole lot, man. Like, they didn't introduce a whole lot of different mechanics, other than the fact that it's a moon, so there's less gravity, so you can
Ooh.
jump really far and hit things
Ooh.
with your butt.
It's like a bouncy house.
Yeah, well, at points,
Mhm.
because there's sections of the pre-sequel that are like little gravity, and then there's others where there's a controlled environment. But
Mhm.
yeah, like, so I didn't want to necessarily lump two and the pre-sequel together, but I mean, Gearbox did.
Yeah, more or less. And granted, like I don't think I played the pre-sequel ever. So I think
Oh, so good.
I've only played one, two, and three.
Okay.
I didn't even play
No,
that
that's
much of
that's fair.
three, but we'll get there.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean,
Hmm.
the, we talked about the RPG style of these games, and even though it's a first person shooter as
Hmm.
well, these are very long games if you want them
Yeah.
to be.
Hmm. They really
So
are.
yeah, like, I don't blame you at all for that, Joe. The
No.
the the big the big point here that I want people to know about, because once again, I am trying very hard here to not give too much away here. I I don't want to do that.
Hmm.
The big thing that I just want folks to take away from this Handsome Jack side of the series, which I believe Borderlands even called the Handsome Collection, okay, because he's
Yeah,
Handsome
that
Jack.
sounds right. Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
You may think he's like an '80s disc jockey for like a radio host, like on somewhere in LA with that name, Handsome Jack. But no, he is far more than that, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. He is just the pinnacle of what I would think video game villains need to be. Someone that you've got a good understanding of from the I guess the inception of his descent into madness.
That sounds about right.
Um, yeah, but really, what I think they did a good job of from one to two. We talked about listening to the fans and what they wanted. The reviews for one were great from an action standpoint, and the mechanics and what you were doing in the game, right?
Hmm.
The story was not the pinnacle. It was not the thing that you
No.
cared to focus on a whole lot in one. But in Borderlands 2, in the pre-sequel, the story runs the show, because we've already done such great work, or I say Gearbox did such great work on just getting the mechanics of the game right, that in these next two games, the story was the focus. They absolutely nailed it. And so for anyone who, like, loves to really plop themselves into a video game experience and the lore behind it, it doesn't get much better than these two games. Mostly because you get to understand, Joe, even more of these factions that are struggling for, vying for power on Pandora and Elpis. You get to really understand more of the inspirations behind that, and the relevance of these energy sources, these vaults, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, they definitely
So
make it so it's more than just kind of like this mythical thing that everyone just kind of knows they really want, but no one really knows what's in it. We just have to get there. So they really take the time to flesh that out in the upcoming games. Or I
Yeah.
guess the not upcoming, like they're already out, but the sequel
Well,
games.
yeah, yeah. These came out roughly about 7 years ago.
Yeah,
But hey,
you don't have to wait for them.
no, and that's the point, right? I really want people to play these games.
Yeah, you absolutely should. If you have not played them, get out and play them. Or if you haven't played them in a while, get out there and play them again.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something we didn't even mention, Joe. Play them again because Gearbox, like we talked about before, these teams did not want to stop working on these games. So what did they do? They continued to crank out DLCs. They cranked out more features. They cranked out things that you would get if you returned after not playing for a while. So they would give you access to these keys that you could open up loot boxes with. I mean, they absolutely kept working on Borderlands 2 for. I mean, I think they're still working on it now.
Yeah, they haven't quite wrapped it up. They've released it a few times, but they've still got people on it.
Yeah. Oh, they're still pumping out content for this stuff. So yeah, that's what I think. Tying it back to the development cycle of this to realize is that this isn't just a game that is trying to push out, a game every year. They absolutely don't do that. So just credit to the team that they absolutely care about what they're doing. So that kind of brings us though to Borderlands 3. And similar to other topics that we've covered before, if we don't have enough knowledge on it and we haven't done enough with it, we're not going to pretend. I haven't played enough of Borderlands 3, mostly because I decided after spending 9 months to build a proton pack, maybe I should actually try doing that with children finally. So that's why I didn't get to play much Borderlands 3. But Joe, it sounds like you've had a little bit more time with it.
Yeah. I've got a couple of friends that I went to college with, and then my buddy Matt has a penchant for buying lots of games and not always getting around to them. But Borderlands 3 was one of them that he did get around to when I came to visit. And we got, I really don't know how long the game is, so I don't know how far we actually got playing it. But honestly, I had a lot of fun playing it. It was definitely it was more difficult than the previous two games that I'd played. But I mean, I got to play as what I think it's called a mechromancer, where you build up an ultimate and you get to summon a mech comes down and you get to run around in that. So obviously, giant robots, it just gets me.
Yeah, I know that Gage the Necromancer came out in Borderlands 2. So they revived that class in 3.
Yeah, I forgot about Gage because Gage was DLC, and I didn't get to play for the DLC with Gage.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, once again, speaking to the dedication of Gearbox and just continuing to crank out content. Two of the fan favorites from Borderlands 2 ended up being DLC characters. um, but ultimately, I totally agree with you on what I have played with Borderlands 3 so far, because in 1 and 2, once you played the main game, which the main game was I would say it's challenging to a point, but not impossible. Like there's, once you figure out how bosses move and how characters behave and just how to work with the environment, those games are very enjoyable, pretty easy just to kind of set it and forget it, to quote the that old infomercial. But I mean, seriously though, like they're not that hard really to get through the main story. Like they want you to enjoy it. So that's what like game mode plus was for, because you've got the harder versions of the game that you can play through.
Yep.
And yeah.
And what honestly, for whatever developer first came up with New Game Plus, love it. Just being able to go back through the story. It is harder, but you get to keep all of your gear and your stuff from the previous gameplay. Oh,
Yeah.
so great. Games like that. I think the Arkham series, starting with Arkham Cities, when you get to start New Game Plus. The newest God of War has New Game Plus. Oh,
Yeah.
so such a fun idea.
Yeah, and Borderlands would do this in every entry, of the series. And so by the time I got to 3, because like I said, I didn't get to play it that long before I had to, you know, basically raise my family here and do the right thing. but yeah, 3 was incredibly hard out the gate.
Yeah.
I remember just the tutorial section and getting through that first area. It was I died so many times that I had to check to see if I'd actually picked like a difficulty or something. And so I've heard other people say that too, though. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe gamers just got better, and I haven't practiced as much,
I
or
don't know. Like
yeah,
maybe that could be it. And I think it's harder. I really do. Like, granted, again, like my experience of running through like Borderlands was definitely like, again, like you're at level 50 and I'm there at level 1,
yeah,
and everything is just dying, and I just get to like, profit from it. But
yeah,
even then, like I remember like even on like the second playthrough, and my levels now closer to yours, and now the villains are like a lot harder, the enemies are tougher, and even then like it wasn't as difficult as how Borderlands 3 started out. And I'd also like to
yeah.
point out that like what I've been out of like really any sort of competitive gaming. Granted, like competitive gaming, I'm not a pro gamer. I'm too old. No, that that's I'm yeah, not my generation. But like I mean, like I freaking picked up Overwatch for the first time again in like almost a year of like not going with PlayStation Plus. I pick it up and I went like 30-2 like in a competitive match. I'm like, huh, did everyone just like start sucking after I left because I'm not this good normally? But
Well,
no, this game, like I still remember 3 like being pretty difficult out the gate.
yeah, which I will say, I'm not. It didn't like keep me from continuing to play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as we've talked about the Borderlands, series here, and what has worked really well after, the first game not being very strong on the story front, but
Mm-hmm.
strong on gameplay. What may have worked against me at first, other than having my parental obligations here, was the fact that there is a strong story in 2 in the pre-sequel. We've talked about the Telltale series as well with Tales from the Borderlands,
Mm-hmm.
and Tales from the Borderlands also takes what became a very, very well fleshed out universe and characters that are memorable, characters that you've gotten to really enjoy interacting with. And Handsome Jack would be one of those characters. You interact with him again in the pre-sequel, in the Tales from the Borderlands.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say one of these things worked against me for Borderlands 3 is because we've talked about how in the Assassin's Creed series, the strong performance of the Ezio trilogy really kind of took the wind out of it for me when I got to Assassin's Creed 3.
Yeah, not to mention they even switched up composers on you, and Jesper Kidd got the axe.
Oh,
Everything changed on you.
that's just too much. My heart couldn't take it anymore. Yeah. And that I wouldn't say that happened here. I mean, I still bought Borderlands 3. I still
Mm-hmm.
do plan to get through it at some point. But I've already given a lot of credit to Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and now the Tales from the Borderlands game. We'll call it the Handsome Jack trilogy now, is incredibly strong. I mean, it is incredibly strong start to finish. So for folks that didn't even play 1 and just came in at the Handsome collection, you didn't pick a bad time to do it.
Nope.
You really did. So I guess if anything, if I'm going to give a warning to people, it's that, I mean, if you're a fan of Borderlands, like you can just disavow me right now, because I'll say this. But for me, I probably could have stopped at Tales from the Borderlands and I would have been just as happy.
Yeah.
Seriously, like that's
Well,
how much fun I had.
well, I mean, I don't know. Like it's like saying like obviously like the Handsome Jack stuff is kind of like the peak, but at the same time, like you can still enjoy 3. I mean, that was like I can keep like referencing Assassin's Creed 3. I'm not going to deny that the Ezio stuff is probably like the best games. However, like to me, Assassin's Creed 3 is still my favorite game. It's like
Yeah.
someone has like a well-trained German Shepherd that is just like obedient as all heck and does everything and is a super great boy. And then here's me with my dorky corgi. And I'm like, my corgi is better than your sweet German Shepherd, even though mine will like straight up abandon me when he sees another dog. And my neighbor Eric, he will like completely just like say, fuck off, Joe. Eric's around. But I think I like him more. He is my Assassin's Creed 3. And he could be your Borderlands 3. He could be your Borderlands 3.
Well, and that's ultimately the point I was going to make, was that I enjoyed so much of the interactions that you get with the Handsome Jack character, and all of that experience. Because I'll be blunt with you, we're not going to cover the Tales from the Borderlands series today, or the game today, because that is phenomenal. I mean, the Telltale folks, they took basically a universe that was ripe for this type of like swashbuckling adventure, but also introducing new people, new characters into it. So they actually did a brilliant job with crafting a story, because the people from Tales from the Borderlands, they actually end up influencing some of the narrative for Borderlands 3. So for me to say, I probably could have been just as happy. I absolutely need to finish Borderlands 3 because of that, because I know that there's people that I've played with and interacted with that are in this game, and I really want to see what they do. I've somehow remained spoiler free on Borderlands 3, which is enough of a feat in itself. but yeah, I absolutely think that what would be a good idea for us, Joe, is maybe even live play this bitch and show people Borderlands 3, some of our viewers that want to see us fumble through what is a pretty tough game.
Hey, I'm game for that. If we have the technology to share that. I mean, the technology is out there, but do we have it?
It is true that we have a sarcastically low budget for this show, as I'm sure our viewers are aware of.
Oh, we have not exceeded the triple digits for this show, and I mean, we haven't even gotten halfway through those triple digits. No.
Hey, we're doing better than you might think. And once again, we do thank everyone for their support. And thank you for joining us as well for today, because this is a series that, for some folks, it might be difficult to pick a starting point, with video game experiences, especially ones that span, close to 10 years. It can be daunting to try to figure out, okay, should I just start with one, or should I maybe, just jump in at the height of popularity and then work my way back? Honestly, if you do decide to jump in at 2 and, play some of the Handsome Jack stuff and then go back to the beginning, I think you're going to appreciate it differently than you would had you started like I did. But yeah, definitely have fun with the series. Go back, revisit it. There is a ton of content there that you're going to enjoy. Well, thank you for listening to our exploration of Borderlands, a video game series that punched us in the teeth with its creativity and built a world that would mix danger, familiarity, and fun all into one. If you enjoyed this topic, though, why not mention it to others who may enjoy it as well? As we mention literally every week, please comment, subscribe, and leave a review. This critically helps our show to keep growing. We'd also like it if you share a post every now and again. But hey, we love our listeners, and we'd love to keep bringing you more content. As an added bonus, those that leave us a review might be mentioned in future episodes.
Join us next week as we take a look at analyzing the rise of anti-heroes in popular media. Did we just get tired of superheroes being too good for their own, good? Or are we as humans showing a bit too much of our own struggles with idolizing questionable decision makers? We'll get to the bottom of anti-heroes and just how deeply intertwined we are with them in today's media. And until next time, keep on dissecting.